Alright, y'all, we're back with the sixth installment of the 3 for 30 series. If you're new to the series, I take this as an opportunity to basically spew some words on what I think each and every NBA team should be doing this off-season. And on today's episode, we have the New York Knicks, who just recently finished this last season with a 21-45 record, and as of now are looking like a complete mess. So, with that being said, let's get right into my three topics of choice. Now, before we jump into the video, make sure that you drop a like, subscribe, all the good stuff. Go follow me on Twitter if you're interested in some more up-to-date, off the rip takes, or just me tweeting about some random stuff and making subpar jokes on the timeline. So make sure you do that, but let's get back to the video. Alright, so the first point I want to make for the New York Knicks this offseason is the fact that they have a new front office in order. Unfortunately, they still have James Dolan, the infamous James Dolan, still as owner of the team. He has made more roadblocks than helped cross roadblocks for New York and all of New York's fans. But unfortunately, it seems like he's just going to be something you have to deal with if you are a fan of the Knicks for many years to come. And the rest of the NBA will sit back and laugh at you and have a good time doing that. But I personally do feel for Knicks fans just a little bit because Dolan is a pretty awful owner. But besides that, the rest of the front office has seen a lot of overhaul and reworkings over the past year. For starters, they recently hired Leon Rose to be president of basketball operations, and Leon Rose was a great candidate for the job. He worked as an agent for many players over the past 25 years. He's been building lots of great relationships. Rose has even represented some players in the past like LeBron James, Chris Paul, or a New York Knicks favorite, Carmelo Anthony. And even today, he has ties with young stars in Joel Embiid and Karl Anthony Towns. So, the Knicks, bringing Rose in, are hoping to follow the path of a Bob Myers in Golden State or a Rob Pelinka in LA with the Lakers, in hopes that they can bring on a president who has ties with a lot of good NBA players, and in hopes will help lure them to New York and make New York the big free agent destination that it has supposed to have been for the past 10-15 years. Coming along with Leon Rose is new head coach Tom Thibodeau, and although fans are split on what to think of Tom Thibodeau, and more mainly the fact that the Knicks were very quick to hire him this offseason, now that we have seen a ton of other head coaches get fired or leave their current jobs. I bet a lot of Knicks fans are probably thinking back in retrospect and hoping the Knicks had waited and gotten a better head coach. I'm in that same boat. I think they hired Thibodeau a bit too quick off the rip, and they could have just been a bit more patient and snagged a guy like Kenny Atkinson, or who knows, maybe even a D'Antoni could come back, or I know Doc Rivers probably was not going to go there, but you get what I mean. They could have gotten a better coach than Thibodeau. Although Thibodeau, I feel like, has gotten kind of a bad rep. He's known mainly by fans and media as that coach who plays his players for too long, and while that is true, Thibodeau has done a good job coaching teams. Like I said, he spent 5 years with the Chicago Bulls and probably could have gotten them close to or won a championship had Derrick Rose not hurt his knee, tragically. And then he spent 3 years in Minnesota after his tenure with the Bulls. He was fired midway through his third season as the Timberwolves team was kind of a mess. There was the whole Jimmy Butler feud. Andrew Wiggins wasn't exactly what he panned out to be. So if there's one thing that Knicks fans should be excited for with Tom Thibodeau, is Thibodeau loves his defense. He loves his players who don't necessarily show up in the box score, and he will play those players a lot of minutes, which I know Knicks fans will be very happy to hear. And in talking about that youth, brings me to my second point on the board, is that the Knicks need to be careful to avoid what I like to call the Thunder Blunder, aka they have a lot of young talent, and they're going to have to pick and choose at some point which players they want to keep and which players they want to get rid of and let go, or maybe try and trade for some other assets. Now, I know that in one offseason, not all of the choices will necessarily be made, but now would be a good time to start looking into your future, especially since the Knicks have been trying to bring on a big free agent in recent years. Being able to have a plan and know which young guys you want to play and want to keep and which you don't is very important in that process. But at the same time, you want to make sure and don't pull a Thunder and trade away the wrong guy, which is very difficult for NBA GMs, but I digress. Let's get into the young Knicks core. So here on this little diagram I made up is all Knicks players under 25 years of age who all got 15 or more minutes per game and throughout the games they played this past season. And I'm just going to run through each one quickly and make a few points on each one. Starting with Julius Randle, he's 25. He averaged just under 20 points per game, just under 10 rebounds per game on some okay shooting splits. Now, Julius Randle, I think he should be here to stay. He is on contract for the next couple of years for the Knicks. And although, like I said, his shooting numbers weren't too great, I think this is just a factor of him being the number one option this past season in New York. Whereas in years past, where he is focused on getting better shots and not taking as many shots, when he's played along guys such as Drew Holiday or Anthony Davis, and he's more of a two or three scoring option, then he definitely has much more efficient and better numbers produced. Next up is RJ Barrett. He's only 19. He just had a good rookie season in terms of showing that he's capable of building into the star that many Knicks fans hope he can be. Again, one season in, averaging 14, 5, and 2. You would like to see maybe some better playmaking numbers considered the amount of time he had the ball in his hands as being the primary playmaker on this team. But again, nothing to really worry about. He came into the league to be a scorer. He scored. The playmaking looks like it can come along nicely, and that's all you should really be worried about as a fan. Again, the shooting split's also a little worrisome, but for a rookie that didn't come into the league as the most knockdown shooter, still acceptable. Now, Elfrid Payton at 25 years old, he's the first player that I definitely can see as somewhat expendable. He's pretty much a guaranteed 10 points per game and 7 assists per game. If you go look back over his recent years, pretty much his entire career, he's averaged those same exact numbers. I don't exactly think that he has much left until he hits a ceiling. He's also not a great shooter and probably supposed to be a bench point guard at best. I'll be getting into a bit later what I think Elfrid Payton's future should be in terms of the Knicks, but for now he's a fine starting point guard, preferably a bench point guard, but again, he's fine but also expendable. Now, Mitchell Robinson is the first place where I feel like the Knicks messed up in their rotations this past season. The fact that he was only playing 23 minutes per game, I know it was only his second season and he does have a little bit of learning to do, but the numbers he averaged in 23 minutes per game with 9 points per game, 7 rebounds, and more importantly, 2 blocks per game. And again, in only 23 minutes, if you bump that up to the per 36 numbers, that becomes, I would want to say, like around 15 points, 10 rebounds, and 4 blocks per game, which would be absolutely absurd if he could sustain those numbers over 36 minutes for a full season. Either way, he needs more minutes easily. He should be playing at least 30 minutes a game next season as the starting center. And it's looking like he's been working on his dribbling and his outside shooting. So he didn't shoot any threes in this past season, but he's already a high efficient scorer at the rim. And if he could add a 3-ball and become somewhat of a threat from further range, that's just icing on the cake for the Knicks fans. And then next up, Bobby Portis. To be honest, I'm not really sure why Bobby Portis even signed with the Knicks. He has a team option for $15 million for this upcoming year. I really have no clue what they're going to do with that. But as for Portis, he's only 24. There's a lot of contending teams in this league that I bet would love to have a stretch 4, 3-and-D type talent like Bobby Portis. His numbers were down this year because, again, he wasn't playing as many minutes and wasn't getting as many shots up per game as he had in the past. If you look at his most recent year that he played with the Washington Wizards, on the other hand, with a 6-minute increase per game, he averaged better points per game, better rebounds per game, on much better shooting splits too. So why Portis decided to waste the year with the Knicks and not get much playing time really doesn't make much sense to me, but unfortunately for him, he might be locked into another year in this situation, if the Knicks are to accept his team option. I hope they don't, just for both sides' sake, because Portis himself could easily do better and be on a contending team, and then the Knicks wouldn't have to spend 15 million on a guy that they're only going to play 20 minutes per game again. That brings me to the French Prince, Knicks' favorite, Frank Ntilikina. He seems like he's going to fit right into the Thibodeau system. Great defender, working on his playmaking. Definitely not the best scorer, as he's never topped 40% shooting from the field in his career so far. But again, he's still a really young guy, and definitely someone that the Knicks should hold on to for the future. And now looking at Kevin Knox, 20-year-old who just played his second season in the NBA, had a great rookie year, but then next season, this past season, just completely lost all sorts of skill apparently. The Monstars really came and cookied this man's talent out of nowhere. I think this is a product of a lot of talent coming in around him and stealing his minutes, much like Bobby Portis. But again, to just see that the Knicks were so high on Knox, you can see it here. He was playing almost 30 minutes per game as a rookie and putting up very solid numbers that were somewhat similar to what RJ Barrett did this past year. But then he comes back for his sophomore season and just completely takes a step back, averaging only 6 points per game, 3 rebounds and an assist on not very great shooting splits, whereas compared to his rookie year, where he was averaging over double his points and okay shooting splits, and the step back was not a good sight. And I really hope he can find his way back to whatever he was doing his rookie year, because if not, he could easily be out of the league in a year or two. And then lastly, that brings me to Dennis Smith Jr., who had a really weird season. He had a lot of off the court issues with, I'm pretty sure it was his family, and just a lot of not good stuff. Hopefully with all this off time with the pandemic and the large space in between seasons, he can get everything resolved, because he wasn't getting that many minutes per game in this past season with the Knicks. But if we do look at the year prior, he was, for albeit a pretty small sample size at 14 games after a trade from Dallas, he was getting almost 30 minutes per game, and he was averaging almost 15, 5 assists, and over a steal per game. And although his three-point shooting numbers were not great by any means, he's still a pretty efficient scorer for being a driving point guard, playmaking point guard who was in the league for, I want to say it was his third year last year, the year before last year. But either way, Dennis Smith Jr. was formerly a 9th overall pick and showed great spurts in both Dallas and New York just a few seasons ago. So, like I said, I hope he's got these off-the-court issues solved, because he could easily be a big piece for New York moving forward if he can find his rookie, sophomore self again. And then that brings me to my last point for the Knicks to ease into free agency. Now, with such an abundance of just young guys on the team, this past year the Knicks only had 2 players over the age of 30, which is kind of absurd if you think about it. But the Knicks are in a position where they're not like many other bad teams, where a lot of the other bad teams, even some I've already talked about, like the Detroit Pistons, a lot of those teams are simply just lacking in number of young guys to have star potential. Whereas if you look at this Knicks roster, I mean, they could easily have like 5 or 6 guys who are in their low 20s who could come out and be solid, at least solid rotational players on a contending team. It's just a matter of time for them to maybe figure it out. But with that need for some time to figure it out, there is a need for the Knicks to go into free agency this offseason and spend a lot of money. If there is one guy who they maybe should think about doing it for, it's someone I've talked about in some previous videos, Fred VanVleet. Why throwing a max contract at Fred VanVleet this offseason wouldn't be a terrible idea is, for starters, because the Knicks are in need of a true point guard. Again, Elfrid Payton has been a good fill-in, but at some point you're going to have to move on from him and find someone who is just simply better, and Fred VanVleet could easily be this guy. He just had his first full season as a starting guard with the Toronto Raptors and put up good numbers, put up 17 points per game, got some assists, got some steals. He's a plus defender. He's still working on his playmaking a little bit, but he's has a really good ability to score, and he can score from deep as well. This is something that the Knicks need a lot of. They need someone who can play make from the point guard position. They need someone who can help stretch the floor, as a lot of these young guys I've talked about are not great shooters, and they'll need someone else to help expand the floor so that these young guys can drive and get to the rim like they do best. And again, Fred VanVleet just checks all these boxes for the Knicks. He is in a position where he can go to any team he wants. He's going to be an unrestricted free agent. It's just going to be a matter of where he wants to go, or maybe who throws the most money. And if there's one thing the Knicks know how to do, they know how to throw money. And again, there's going to be a much better free agency class in 2 off seasons, but Fred VanVleet is currently the only real free agent in this upcoming class, barring any weird team options or player options not being accepted, that he's really the only one that's worthy of a max contract or anything near it. So the Knicks should definitely take the chance of just throwing some money out to this guy, because if you do end up getting him as the New York front office, you can have one season where, again, you kind of figure out which of these young guys you want to keep and which you want to let go, but you can maybe win some more games with Fred VanVleet being the leader on your team. Julius Randle bumps back to the number 2 or number 3 scoring option. RJ Barrett has some pressure relieved off of him, and he can focus on improving the game, areas of his game that he needs to improve. And more importantly, having a guy like Fred VanVleet will only make New York a more desirable destination in the next year's free agency, which is the one with all the loaded talent. And hopefully you can make a bigger splash then if you're the New York Knicks. Now, if you don't get Fred VanVleet, another option you can do is to take the 7th pick in this current upcoming draft and try to pair maybe a Kevin Knox or another one of these younger guys with that pick in order to try and go get a superstar. You might need more than one of these guys from the younger core, but again, with the Knicks having so many, they have a lot of options and they have a lot of assets currently, and they're going to be trying to make a big move soon, and I definitely think it's something that they should be going after. And that'll do it for today's video. As always, drop a comment down below if you agree or disagree with anything I have talked about today. And again, drop a like, subscribe, all that good stuff. Follow me on Twitter. And most importantly, out of that all, thank you for watching. Is my hair looking good? We all looking good? A little scruffy today, but